Welcome to our porch.
Welcome
Let's
to our
chat.
porch. Hey, fire.
That should be our saying.
Yeah. All right, today we are talking about a question that we got. Actually, we get this question like a lot, which I think is great because it kind of just shows like the people that are are engaging with our stuff is people who are going through seasons either that we just went through or that are in the same season as us, which I think is super cool. Today is our first porch chat from our porch, like our actual porch.
Yeah, so it's a really official thing that we're doing now because it's on our own personal porch.
And we got mics today because last week, if you watch that video, the audio was terrible.
Yeah, it was kind of bad, but we were also on a trip, so we were making do, so we didn't have to bring our gear with us. So.
Yep.
Hey, let's chat. Boundaries for Christian dating, especially kissing. What did you guys practice? Let's get into it. What did we practice?
I think we had multiple different like practices during our time dating. Like for different stages, because especially even like once we got engaged, it was so different. Like for what we felt like we were comfortable like with doing, but also like what we felt was appropriate at the time.
I would say we went through phases with this, and I think like anything, when you're seeking to honor the Lord in something that is difficult, you go through phases where you're really strong in it. And I think in a lot of ways, the way in which we spent time with the Lord and the way our priority was Him was a determining factor on how we were doing physically and our desires to, because I think so much of it is we definitely had certain boundaries in place at certain times when it was more difficult. But I think for us, what was more important was having our heart on the right things, because you can set a lot of
more impactful for us. Oh
yeah. we flipped places,
because that was more impactful for us than saying like this is a boundary. Was like being closer to the Lord, being more you're distracting me.
I'm serious.
Being closer to the Lord and being more aware of His hate for sin made sin more
distasteful
to us. And then boundaries were easier to keep rather than just being like, hey, this is a rule, this is this boundary, we're gonna do this.
Doesn't work.
Didn't work for us. So
and I think that would be my biggest encouragement. I'm obviously very passionate about this, but I think I saw this for us in our dating relationship is sometimes there were rules in place that did not encourage us to honor the Lord. It only encouraged us to keep our sin in the dark. And something that the Lord talks about really often is exposing our sin, is bringing our sin to the light. My dad talks a lot about that. But I think that is the reality of the gospel, right? Like when we're most exposed, like that's when Jesus comes in and that's when He changes our hearts. And so when we are honest about the things we're struggling with and we bring our sin to the light, we have a lot less desire to sin because our sin is not being hidden, it's being exposed, like our temptations too, And so I think no matter what rule you set in place for yourself, for your significant other, what is going to be the driving motivator to not sin is Christ, because Christ is the only thing that centers you. So if you are simply trying to not do something for the sake of it, it's not going to work.
Prioritizing being close with the Lord so that a distance from sin would be prioritizing being close with the Lord so that distancing ourselves from sin was a product of that.
And I think something we have used the example of maybe before, but at least in conversation with each other is, the Bible talks a lot about repentance, and the idea of repentance from sin doesn't just look like turning away from sin and being like, no, I'm not going to do that. It looks like, okay, I'm going to turn towards Christ. And so I think for us, like in our own boundaries and our own goals in our relationship, that was something that we really realized is like the more that we desired relationship with Christ and not just to turn away from our sin, but to turn towards Christ, like those were the times that we struggled with it the least, because our desire and our goal was to honor Christ with each other and not just to not do the bad thing, right? Like that's not the gospel, and that's not Christ. Like, Christ is holiness and walking with him and walking in nearness to him. And the reason that he doesn't desire us to sin is because it dishonors him and it puts distance between our relationship with him.
Yeah.
So it's not just, no, don't do that. It's
not
come to
just
me.
condemnation.
Yes. And I think that's just something that we have really too talked about with parenting. Like, for us, that we really want to focus on is not just looking at our kids and saying no, but saying, hey, run to Jesus. Like, run to Christ, the only thing that can keep you from your sin and keep you from yourself. Like, the hope of the gospel that is, like, everything good is found in me. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But specifically for us, like, boundary-wise, since I know that is definitely a big part of the question, and somebody's gonna comment and be like, well, you didn't actually talk about, like, what your boundaries were. For us, a big priority was not allowing situations to allow for temptation. Because for us, the biggest struggle was we would get in a situation where we knew we would be tempted.
Yeah.
Or we would fall into a pattern of setting ourselves up for failure.
Yeah.
And
because we also, you guys have to remember too, like, we were together for a really long time. Like, we knew ourselves, like, we knew our relationship and what would cause us to be tempted and, like, what wouldn't. And so that's true. That's good.
So, but that was just a big part of it, was, like, not being alone late, or not, like, snuggling up to each other on the couch, like, alone, or...
Because let's be honest, movie nights by yourselves for any reason is not a good idea. It's never a good idea.
If you're not married.
If you're not married. Like, it's just not wise, you know?
Yeah.
Because, like, kind of, it's really, like, making provision for the flesh is really the concept of, like... Yeah. It kind of takes it to a place of, like, how close can I get to where my areas of sin are without sinning? And that's just not a good game to play with yourself, because you're human.
And yes.
Yeah. Sorry,
that's what I was going to say. Exactly. No, you're right. I appreciate you saying it.
And I would say, like, the practical boundaries, I know that it can feel a little bit like, but we want to step by step. And I think some of it is, like, for you, if making provision for your flesh is kicking each other, is kissing, then don't kiss. Like, if making provision for your flesh is hugging, then don't hug. And I know that sounds really dramatic, but for us, like, there were certain things that it was like, we could hold hands and it wasn't making room for those things. Like, we could kiss each other. And if we did it within reason and we weren't making room for something to happen further situationally, then we could do that and not make provision for our flesh. But I think that's going to look different for everyone. And I would just say that, like, conviction without Christ is actually not conviction. It's just legalism. And I think, that that's the line that you'll find yourself kind of towing, is like, am I just being legalistic to try to create rules for myself to follow a rule book? Or am I trying to honor Christ in my relationship? And I think that that's going to be the question you have to ask yourself. Like, am I just following rules, or am I trying to honor Christ? And it's like that with anything else, you know? It's like that in our relationship with the body, with church. Like, am I just going through the motions to go through the motions, or am I seeking to grow in my relationship with the Lord and to grow in holiness and honoring him, you know? So I think that's just an area to be alert with yourself, be aware of your motivation behind things, because if your motivation is simply rules and conviction without Christ, then it's empty, you know? Yeah. So
any questions that you would like answered, also put them in the comments.
We're going to be doing lots of porch chats.
We got lots of them
hopefully earlier in the morning, so there's not so many people.
So it won't be so hot.
And so it won't be hot.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we love you guys. We're so thankful for your intentional questions. We love talking about these things, and we're thankful for you. Thank you for supporting us. And
share these if they have encouraged you in any way.
Yeah.
For anyone that you think might be encouraged by them.
Send to a friend.
Absolutely. And go follow Ocean Cove.
Yes, follow Ocean Cove. Use the code OC15 to get 15% off. And we love you guys. See you next time.
Have a great rest of your day.